Hello everyone, welcome back to Dumb and Dumber. This is the series that is slowly cataloguing the slow motion car wreck that is the careers of David Benioff and D.B. Weiss, the former Game of Show showrunners who ran the entire series straight into the ground with their apathy, incompetence, and lazy writing. The series finale of Game of Thrones Season 8 was an absolute dumpster fire. We all know that. I don't think anyone's defending it. And now we get to rejoice because, as I reported in my last video, and feel free to go check it out if you wish, Dumb and Dumber have quit Star Wars. They will not be proceeding with their planned trilogy, with their first installment planning to release in 2022. Now that makes me so fucking happy. I've seen people on the internet saying that this is Kathleen Kennedy's fault, that they're trying to spin the narrative that this shows the poor leadership of Kathleen Kennedy. That, this is another, they're trying to spin it almost, and I don't entirely disagree with them, mind you, but they're trying to, I don't like the way they're spinning it. They're trying to put this on Kennedy's shoulders when it should be put on Dumb and Dumber's shoulders, is what I'm getting at. Kathleen Kennedy is a fucking airhead. I've said that many times. She's a crap leader. She's a crap everything, really. And I've gone on record saying that hiring her to run Lucasfilm was George Lucas's biggest mistake. And I love George Lucas. You guys all know that. But I don't like the way they're spinning it, that this just shows the incompetence of Kathleen Kennedy. She can't keep her directors on a leash. People are leaving. There's a high staff turnover. Writers coming and going. Directors not being able to finish projects, rewrites, reshoots, all this. There's a lot of truth to that. I mean, just look at, Force Awakens, Rogue One, etc. But I firmly place this on the shoulders of Dumb and Dumber. Their incompetence is what is forcing them to step away from Star Wars, and I can't say definitively that they were fired, right? Because the reports have gone on record. Disney has gone on record. They've gone on record saying that they left Star Wars, that they've just gone their separate ways, simple as that. But that is in perfect timing following a disastrous Q&A that happened at the Austin Film Festival. And that's what this is going to go into. That I believe is the real reason why they were let go, kicked out on their sorry asses for the dumb fucks that they are. Now we're going to go through this article that is by, Chris Smith on the website BGR, whatever that is. Anyway, you can find articles like this all over the internet, but we're going to go with this one. And what this does is that this article doesn't sugarcoat it either. So the article, what a legend! I love how he's titled this. Game of Thrones creators confirmed they had no clue what they were doing. Now, I have things to say about Game of Thrones dating as far back as season 1, and I will make those videos eventually. But this dissection and overview of the Q&A that transpired at the Austin Film Festival, this happened just before the news was broken that they were let go from Star Wars. Now, believe what you will, but I think that's too damn convenient to be a coincidence. So, we're going to go through it, and oh boy, prepare yourselves. So this article, there's going to be an overview, and then it's going to play into a Twitter thread that explains it all. And you'll see all the details on screen. You can read it for yourself. And we will discuss it. But I need to point out before we begin that a lot of people have thought that they weren't being serious, that this was just a mock Q&A. They were just trying to give people something to talk about, some buzz. But given the fact that they've stepped away from Star Wars, allegedly, I know in my heart, in my brain, that they were fired. They were kicked out. Disney said, we'll let them go, but we'll leave it on good terms, and we'll see what happens when the dust settles. Hell, they could come back to Star Wars a bit later. Kathleen Kennedy has said as much. They look forward to working with them in the future, should the opportunity rise. And they've spun it as, we need to work on our Netflix projects. And Netflix, well, I mean, I had it's funny with Netflix. I had bad things to say about Netflix last week, but over the past week, they've actually released some news. They're bringing some actual good shit to the platform, thankfully. Unfortunately, Dumb and Dumber are not one of them. So, anyway, sorry to keep you waiting. Let's get on with the article. So, Chris Smith goes on to write, it was supposed to be a massive accomplishment for HBO and the Game of Thrones team. But Season 8 was instead a huge disappointment. For the 100th time, it wasn't the final destination that bummed everyone out, but the road that got us there. Showrunners D.B. Weiss and David Benioff were heavily criticized for the final 6 episodes, and the finale is the worst rated episode in Game of Thrones history. The scripts were often rushed, foregoing logic and common sense, with Dumb and Dumber choosing to subvert expectations than deliver the final season fans wanted. Fans did not forgive them, and they were quick to Google bomb the showrunners. Just search for bad writers and see what happens. Ooh, alright. If you're ever on Google, guys, search bad writers, see what pops up. I'm really liking this article so far. This guy's a legend. Others started a petition asking for HBO to remake the final season with better writers, with more than 1.75 million people having signed it since May. Crazy. And well done to everyone who signed the petition. Crazy. The article goes on to say, Benioff and Weiss have avoided speaking publicly about Season 8 since it aired. They even cancelled their Comic-Con appearance, and haven't really had anything to say since the Emmys. But the two just appeared at the Austin Film Festival, where they essentially confirmed they are bad writers. Okay, brace yourselves, here we go. Twitter user 4Aya live tweeted most of the panel that Benioff and Weiss attended, where they casually revealed details about how inexperienced they were when pitching and making Game of Thrones. Okay, now we're going to go through the Twitter thread. Pitching Game of Thrones was challenging. Dan is saying that writers and source material end up in divorce, and that their divorce was amicable since they ran out of material. They are describing their pitch and how nervous they were. They pitched to Carol Strauss, who has a reputation for being a tough pitch. They were very nervous because of how bad they wanted it. Alright. There you go. They wanted something to get their careers off the ground. And what better treasure trove of source material than George R. R. Martin's, it would seem. David is describing the pre-meeting with George R. R. Martin, who was questioning their bona fides. And we didn't really have any. We had never done TV, and we didn't have any. We don't know why he trusted us with his life's work. That's straight from David Benioff's mouth, ladies and gentlemen. Wow. And if you there's details regarding the pilot that I will make a separate video on that really brings HBO's judgment into question too, because they almost blew the pilot, and that in itself is a story. Maybe they'll touch upon it here. We'll see how we go. He said that they wouldn't hire writers unless they were willing to be part of the production team. I'm guessing that's referring to HBO. Anyway, she ended up leaving the show to write that. QRE, how do you pitch a show this big? And they said it was basically a con job to HBO, and how big it would be, because they bet on the HBO execs not reading the 5,000 pages of A Song of Ice and Fire. The pitch was impossible to pitch the whole story. Okay, so they were relying on HBO's ignorance. So yeah, we got a fantasy series, we got all these pages, we got all this shit to work with, let's do it, and then we'll get off the ground and see how it goes. Alright, so then they did it, they followed the source material, and when the source material ran out, before the source material went out, they just did their own thing and just wrapped it up the way they wanted to, because they didn't give a fuck, and they never gave a fuck. They were just looking for something easy to adapt and to make money off. They decided to pitch the pilot and not the series, in a way that was understandable to folks they were pitching to. Then they did a vague overview of the series, with not a lot of details. There was no way to summarize the story, so we didn't. Yeah, they didn't. Well, there is a way to summarize the story, dickhead. You were just relying on the show, the laziness of studio execs that just want to make money. They didn't give a fuck about. They just want to know, can you make money off it? They pitched the pilot episode, which was easy to summarize, and they didn't bother to explain how this would progress if it was successful over the next 8 to 10 years. When HBO saw it progressing so well in the earlier seasons, they wanted 13 seasons. Why the fuck not? But Dumb and Dumber didn't want it because they were done, they made their money, and they wanted out. Anyway, alright, here we go. This will be interesting. This is what I was talking about. The pilot was terrible and HBO had to fix it. They talked about the pilot and their friends who they let watch their first attempt at a pilot. One of the people was Craig Mazin, who wrote Chernobyl. Scott Frank and Ted Griffin, he acknowledged that the first pilot was basic writing mistakes. They acknowledge that they have no idea why, after such a dismal pilot, they went forward. Everything we could make a mistake in, we did. Script, casting, costume, etc. They think HBO went forward because they had a lot of foreign pre-sales on the series. Again, HBO only cares about money. And they were willing to fund a satisfying, well-nuanced final season to Game of Thrones. But yeah, these two were just a couple of con artists trying to sell an idea. They ran with it, they made money, and then once the money came in and their passion ran out, they just and the source material ran out, and they actually had to work for a living. They just disrespected it, didn't give a shit, and tried to get themselves out as quickly as possible. 2 months before the pilot was to air, the episodes were averaging 39 minutes, and HBO made them write and film 100 minutes of scenes to meet their contractual obligations. For example, they added a scene with Robert and Cersei and realized that there was no scene with them. The moderator is asking them about their comments, acknowledging that they didn't understand the characters, and the extra minutes helped them understand the characters better. Wow. So they didn't even... I mean, apparently that scene with Robert and Cersei was not even in the books. I haven't read that far, unfortunately, but I have heard that, and I do like that scene. So that I will give credit to Dumb and Dumber there. But they threw that in there to meet their minute quota. And by filming the actors and the characters in play with one another, that helped them understand them better. Shouldn't you have gone into that already understanding the characters, you two fucking schmucks? Then I imagine this is Benioff or Weiss who's answering this question. Why did the battles get better? We kept our core crew together, he replied. They had the same stunt team and the same people who did the blood scenes in Season 2 as the ones that they did in Season 7. The scenes got better and better as we did. The two of us and Miguel spent a lot of time together. They talked with him about the shots always being from someone's point of view, so it didn't feel like a video game. Okay, that's a weird... Alright. Season 1, we wanted to have a battle, but we ran out of money. The extra 100 minutes, which HBO forced them to film to meet their contractual quota. Thus, the drinking game scene. Wait, what? The drinking... Oh, with... Wow, so they ran out of budget, and because they couldn't film the battle of, I think it was Oxcross or something, where Tyrion and the wildlings fight Robb Stark's decoy army. So they had that drinking game with Bronn, Shay, and Tyrion instead. Yeah, and it's funny how all those scenes are like sexual conversation in nature, or just talking about something so insignificant and retarded when it's helmed by D&D. Not all the time, admittedly, but a lot of the time they have the weirdest fucking dialogue scenes, like to just jar you like a motherfucker. It's like, why are we talking about this? Anyway, Game of Thrones was film school for them, but they weren't great students. Oh, here we go. Dan is saying that hashtag Game of Thrones was basically an expensive film school for he and Dave. For example, they had no idea how to work with costume designers, and it was a huge learning experience. It just goes to show just how out of their fucking element they are. People were quoting them. Kathleen Kennedy, Netflix, and just about all of Hollywood in their fucking echo chamber called these guys master storytellers, but that's crap, man. They had no idea what the fuck they were doing. They just had a very detailed instruction manual and they ran with it. Dan is saying that he let the actors redefine the roles, especially Maisie, and they began writing for the actors. It is like the actor moved into the house and redecorated, he said. He learned about the characters from the actors. How about you learn about the characters by reading the fucking books, you twat? The moderator asked why they chose to write all the episodes by themselves. Because we didn't know better, David said. HBO wanted them to hire other writers, and they decided to have Brian Cogman, their assistant, write 4 episodes. What did you learn from that? She went on to ask. You made 30 feature films in 8 years, which is more than anyone out there, than Woody Allen. She is asking about the Battle of the Bastards. They used every season as a learning experience. The CGI of what the dragons looked like was particularly challenging. They said by season 4 that Miguel was doing night shoots and they had decided no one would miss them if they backed away. Battle of Winterfell took 10 straight weeks. Yeah, you can see behind the scenes documentary on the Battle of Winterfell. It's a good watch. I highly recommend checking it out. And Dumb and Dumber don't show their faces, which is a huge plus for that documentary. Oh, they show their faces just a tiny bit, but it's not really about them. It's about the cast and crew. Very good watch. As for feedback from the fans, they didn't see any value in listening to them. Wow. All right, let's keep going. When we pitched HBO, we promised them that we would downplay the fantasy elements. Paraphrase. She is challenging the fact of how the Night King and the White Walkers and how it played out. They are expressing regret about putting the baby on the block of ice and having him screaming. The mother was not happy because Dan just kept talking about a close-up of the baby's penis. They are very granular in details of shots, admitting losing sight of the big picture. Yeah, I have no idea what the fuck you were thinking with that. You fucking... What? What? Yeah. In case you guys were wondering what that was referring to, but you probably know, it was the scene from season 4 when the White Walker took the baby onto the lake and like converted him into a White Walker. That's the scene, and it was... God damn, that's what you were thinking while during that shot. Not how we can explain this later. You're thinking about, can we get the baby's penis just right in frame? Man, I mean, I knew these guys were fucking stupid, but Jesus. And they failed to grasp the scope of the books. Were you listening to the feedback of your fans as things went along? Dan said, no, we really did not. Dan doesn't see the value in considering other people's reactions. Dave acknowledged that he Googled the show and it upset him. Did you really sit down and try to boil the elements of the books down? Did you really try to understand its major elements? No, we didn't. The scope was too big. It was about the scenes we were trying to depict, and the show was about power. Right, so that explains why the White Walkers and the fucking Night King were so downplayed, because they wanted to show all the political jargon and try and wrap up the White Walkers as quickly as they could, so they could come up with something as generic as possible to decide the fate of power in Westeros and blah, 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 blah. Yeah, so, and, like, yeah, they cut out as much of the fantasy elements as possible. That explains why there was no, like, Euron from, and all his magic and the old Valyria and his Valyrian steel armor, all that was lost. That's why, what else was cut out? A few things. I think regarding Stannis as well, a few things were cut out. But the point being, they were just focused on keeping it contained on the shit they did understand, which was the politics, without, you know what I mean? They act like the hardcore fans of a song about, like, we were hardcore fans of George R. R. Martin, and we pitched the idea to him, we hope, and we were so thrilled. It was an honor when he said yes. They didn't give a fuck. They just saw something intriguing, and they fucking ran with it. But they didn't bother to care or understand the scope of it. It's fucking despicable, man. Because they got everyone's, they tickled everyone's ballsack by hyping this series up. Got everyone invested for 8 years, the better part of a decade. And when they fucking ran out of ideas, they just wrapped everything up in a neat little bow as quick as they could, with as much nuance as they could get away with having that cut out, just to fucking come out clean on the other side with their worthless hack job. Sorry, Hollywood asses, man. Fuck those two. Essentially, they kept telling the audience they're bad writers. Okay, here we go. Dan wanted to remove as many fantasy elements as possible because we just didn't want to appeal to that type of fan. They wanted to expand the fan base to people beyond the fantasy fan base, to mothers and NFL players. What the actual fuck? You're telling me you didn't want to appeal to actually fans of the source material. Makes sense, because you knew that if you tried to, the people who fucking read the source material would call you out for being the bunch of fucking worthless hacks that you are. And it's very evident with Season 8 that that's what happened. Right? So instead of actually showing some intelligence and putting some work in, you skimmed over the pages and you tried to say, how can we reframe this awesome fantasy series into something that a fucking NFL player could, yeah, watch it, it's such a shocking show, it's about politics, about sex, it's about battles and medieval, and yeah. That's the kind of fan. They didn't want to appeal to the hardcore audience and make something intelligent. They wanted to appeal to the casuals. That was always their intention, is what they're saying here. She's asking about the violence, David. To be honest, we went a bit too far with some of those. I would agree with that. Pashka, I believe it's important to show violence, realistic violence. If you're depicting something in the medieval times and it's rated R and etc. But I'm talking about things like what happened to Sansa in season 5. That's where I think they went too far. Not even too far. It was just fucking retarded the way they wrote it, and that's what pissed me off so much. Anyway, he comments on the jousting scene with the mountain and how Sir Hugh, that it was in the scene too long. He compares it to Ozark's Jason Bateman's toenail being ripped out. I have no idea what the hell that's referencing. They went on to ask, what was your process? They went on to ask. We just started writing, but as things went on, we had to outline divided up scripts, whatever. They didn't work together in the same room. One took the first half, the other took the last half, then they would swap. They gave episodes to Brian Cogman and David Hill. How about you actually fucking sit down together and write it, you chumps? Jesus. Dab is saying how much it must mean Dan. Dan is saying how much they love the books, but they had to make it their own. They have stressed several times about giving up 10 years of their life. They referenced David Chase in The Sopranos and how he said, this was all such a blur. Doesn't look like you put much time into anything, mate. You fucking sat down and you wrote a couple of crappy episodes and you told everyone else what to do. And yet they refused to seek help. Casting also dictated how and when they killed people. Question about scouting locations. They are crediting the location director in Belfast. Sorry, I didn't catch the name. They asked about not including women in the POC, in the writer's room. Not quite sure what the POC is, but anyway. They didn't have a writer's room, and there was one woman who wrote a few scenes. They decided up front that it was going to be the two of them. David Hill is of Asian descent. I'm not quite sure how that's relevant, but okay, you should just say that they just kept it to themselves when they should have sought out help because they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They weren't law specialists or anything like that, and they aren't good writers to begin with. They're inexperienced as fuck, and they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Making the show was either too much energy and too time-consuming for them, or just a drunk party. Dan went on to say it was like a 10-year drunk party. Then he was asked the question, how did you have a life, keep families going, etc.? He's like, we loved our Game of Thrones family, but it was very hard. Our kids and wives became best friends, and it felt like a big family. It's hard to complain how hard we were working when you see a set painter, Dan said. Wait, what? Going forward, Benioff and Weiss will continue to work on their Netflix shows and the Star Wars franchise, but fans will never forget the final season of Game of Thrones. Yep, you can say that again, Mr. Reporter Man. And I believe that is the end of... Yep, that's the end of the article. It was very out of order. I'm sorry if it didn't make sense to a lot of you, but you can find the Twitter thread from Needle and Pen. It's funny, the Twitter user is called For Aya, so maybe she made that out of spite because she hated season 8. I don't know. But there you go, guys. That's the history of these two jackasses. That's the history of Dumb and Dumber. Their attitude towards beginning this project and helming this project. It went in depth as to how inexperienced they truly were, how apathetic they were, how disrespectful they were, and how disrespectful they treated the material. From day one, it goes into detail as to how they disregarded the hardcore fans from the get-go and tried to dumb down the series as simple as possible to appeal to NFL players and the casual audience. And, when we all know the rest is history. Season 7 happened, they had no more material. Hell, season 5 happened, they were almost out of material. And they still, they cut corners in season 5. It was very element. They didn't expand on anything. They dumbed it down. When the story was expanding out like tree branches, they cut it off at the stem and funneled it into a linear story from season 5 onwards. And it was when they had nothing, literally nothing to go off, and they had to wrap things up. Well, they fucked us all. They fucked us, and their Hollywood career is on a downward spiral. I hope Netflix finds a way to kick them out. I guarantee the next project isn't going to be well received, or there's going to be almost no passion for that upcoming project whatsoever from the audience. And hopefully we have some more good news saying that, I don't know, David Benioff was spotted at a McDonald's somewhere serving drinks. Who knows? But yeah, that's the end of the article. Feel free to check it out at your leisure. I will link this article below. You can have a read if you like and want a more in-depth look. Did the best I could with explaining it to you. And the story continues. The series continues. And, well, I hope you're enjoying the ride so far. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Thanks for everyone on Patreon and Subscribe Star for supporting me. If you'd like to support the channel with a monthly donation, check those links out there in the description. Thanks to everyone on Discord. If you'd like to chat with me and my community, click the Discord link in the description and you can find me there. And again, thanks for staying to the end. I appreciate your time and I will be back later. Ciao!